tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
The community was shaken by the horrific crime.
16 years after killing his pregnant wife, Mukhtar Pengali is granted day parole. And as wildfires burn in BC, a better day for crews as weather makes it easier to fight the flames. Also,
it's just not been around long enough for me to trust it.
Yeah, we plan on getting vaccinated. We trust the science behind it.
our littlest ones now eligible for the COVID vaccine in BC, but what's the uptake like?
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. We begin tonight with a former Surrey high school teacher sentenced to life in prison for strangling his pregnant wife and burning her body. He's been granted day parole. Dan Burrett is on this story for us tonight. Dan, this involves Mukhtar Pengali and Manjeet Pengali, his wife. Can you take us through some of the details, what happened and what we've learned today?
And they are disturbing. It was October 2006, Anita. Manjeet Pengali was 4 months pregnant, already the mother of a young child when she went missing. Her husband, Mukhtar, reported her missing and made a tearful plea to help find her. Days later, police found her badly burned body in Delta. It was later determined Mukhtar strangled his wife to death in their home and burned her remains to try to cover up the crime. He was charged with second-degree murder, convicted, and in 2011 sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 15 years. In its decision from late July, the Parole Board of Canada says that Pengali appears to have accepted responsibility for his actions and has tried to change, even though he pleaded not guilty and appealed his sentence. The board says reports indicated that you expressed deep regret for your regressive and rather archaic attitudes and beliefs about marriage and intimate relationships. Correctional Services Canada has reported there is little more you can do within an institutional setting to address your risk factors as you have exhausted available programming. The board notes Pengali has been taken part in 50 escorted temporary absences and a few unescorted leaves to visit family with no issues. He's to serve his day parole in a community correctional center. He cannot contact his daughter, he can't drink alcohol or take drugs, and he must report all relationships with women or attempts to start one, Anita.
All right, Dan, Manjeet Pengali's murder was one of several brutal killings of South Asian women around that time. What are advocates saying about the decision to grant day parole to her killer?
Several we spoke with today note Manjeet Pengali's murder had a massive effect on the community, and they stress preventing intimate partner violence is a community effort. Still, Ninu Kang says she's sickened by this decision.
Knowing that, he cut short somebody's life, I think is a reminder to many women who experience violence that sometimes it feels like there is no justice.
While the parole board believes it, Mukhtar Pengali can successfully reintegrate into society. It notes the serious and violent nature of his crime, and it was not lost on them, saying, quote, "Your actions were callous and vicious, and we have left the victim's family significantly traumatized." Anita.
Dan Burrett live for us tonight, and we will have more on this with an interview later in the show. Thank you, Dan. Well, crews are still trying to get a handle on fast-growing wildfires in this province. There are now 5 wildfires of note, and tonight we are looking at the Caramias Creek fire, where crews are taking advantage of cooler temperatures to try to get the upper hand. Tom Popick has more on those getting set to move out of the way.
In the shadow of a smoke plume,
we're leaving.
Dory Watts is getting ready to flee the family farm.
Oh, well, I'm worried for my daughter because I don't want her house to burn. Other than that, we're just all prepared as much as we can, and we're going to try and get out of here safely.
That means sprinklers on the roof, trucks hauling out horses and livestock. But time is running out. The Caramias Creek wildfire has grown to 28 square kilometers, burning through inaccessible rocky terrain. The heavy smoke often hampering air crews dropping water on the tinder dry brush. Highway 3A between Penticton and Caramias is closed to allow for controlled burns. Almost 230 firefighters are now on the fire line. Crews from nearby cities are prepared to douse structure fires. So far, only 1 home lost. For the moment, it's as good as it gets.
In the next few days and throughout this week, the southern part of the province is expected to have lower temperatures, which will help us with our relative humidity recoveries overnight. This is a good sign for our crews as it'll allow them to get an upper hand.
But there have been 81 fire starts in the past 2 days, 121 in the past week, most caused by lightning strikes. Evacuation alerts are also in effect for 55 homes near Lytton, properties near the Biggs Creek fire in the central Kootenays, and near the Watching Creek fire close to Kamloops. Some are on First Nations land.
Some of them may have moved out just to be safe, but I do know that some home members are staying there for now.
Part of Dory's family are also staying to fight the flames.
Keeping everybody as calm as I can and feeding everybody and, trying to make sure that whoever's here, there's 3 families here, so I make sure that everybody's out and that they're safe.
Tom Popick, CBC News, near Twin Lakes, BC.
Some businesses close to that Caramias Creek wildfire are bracing for the worst. The Green Mountain Health Alliance is located just east of the fire. It's a new medical cannabis startup nestled between Caramias and Penticton. Workers say the property is outfitted with protections like sprinklers, but watching the fire grow is still nerve-wracking.
It's a heightened level of anxiety throughout the community. I really feel for rural property owners with livestock because that is a huge concern. You potentially may not be able to move all of your animals in time, so that's tragic. Obviously human life is paramount. There's all of these other elements that make people, even as the people's behavior on the highways, you can see there's a heightened level of stress and anxiety out there with aggressive driving and everybody trying to get where they need to be. But it's a really it's a stressful situation.
The Caramias Creek wildfire has so far led to evacuation orders for 324 properties, with 438 more under evacuation alert. And with the ever-increasing fire risk, a widespread fire ban, including campfires, is coming to the south of the province. The Southeast, Kamloops, and coastal fire centres are all putting restrictions in starting at 12 noon this Thursday. Fireworks, torches, and sky lanterns are also prohibited. Only Haida Gwaii is unaffected by the ban. Nearly half of the fires reported to BC Wildfire have been human-caused so far. Campers can still use propane cooking devices, and anyone caught violating the ban faces heavy fines. Well, Johanna Wagstaff is off tonight. Kuljeet Kaila is here. I know you're watching all of this closely. Safe to say, no mystery as to why there is a widespread fire ban.
Exactly, and I'm going to get to that in just a moment, but we're going to start off with the current conditions across BC have dropped right down. The heat warning is gone, as you can tell, and that happened just before noon today, but we are still above seasonal temperatures by just a little bit, and that's going to remain. Today's fire danger rating still sitting from between high to extreme for 2/3 of the province, and those areas that you mentioned, Anita, Okanagan, the Kootenays, still in the red, so be extra careful through there. We'll keep you updated on that. In those areas is where we got 3 of our hot spots, so temperature still soaring. In Osoyoos at 32 degrees, 31 for Lillooet. Ashcroft came in at 28.4, so temperatures pretty high in those spots. Here's some things you need to know about the Lower Mainland into tonight. Humidex is still pretty high, 26 degrees. A UV index still very high. Winds are going to pick up this evening, cooling things down low to 16, and then rain for Wednesday afternoon. Into Thursday, temperatures are going to drop again for tomorrow, so things are going to start getting cooler here in the Lower Mainland. And as we move into the rest of the week, I'll have details on that coming up.
All right, thanks, Kuljeet. A snowboard aircraft has crashed at a local airport in Fort St. John. CBC News has learned that the jet stalled on takeoff at around noon today. The pilot managed to turn the jet around and land the aircraft, but blew past the end of the runway. The jet, which belongs to the 431 Squadron, was damaged, and the pilot was given a medical assessment. So far, no injuries have been reported. The snowbirds are set to perform starting Friday at the Abbotsford Air Show. Well, the CEO of BC Housing is retiring, stepping down in September. Shane Ramsey says violence against homeless people and personal threats have led him to this decision. And as Mira Baines reports, it comes on the heels of the provincial government firing the board of BC Housing last month.
CEO of BC Housing, Shane Ramsey, says he can no longer solve the complex problems faced by BC Housing. But he made no mention of the mounting criticism facing BC Housing in the wake of a report by Ernst & Young It criticizes spending and decision-making at the agency. It was after that the provincial government fired the board of BC Housing last month. Today, Ramsey posted a lengthy statement saying that something shifted for him on May 7th. He cited incidents of escalating violence against homeless people, including shootings and a stabbing. Last week, he says he was escorted to a private elevator at Vancouver City Hall after tensions arose about social housing next to the future Arbutus SkyTrain station. He says while one community is facing poor health and violence, another is now unwilling to provide a welcoming space. While BC Housing has received more and more funding, the agency's budget is up more than 140% from 5 years ago. The housing crisis grows beyond its ability to cope. The opposition Liberals say the province needs to provide more oversight on how that money is being spent.
It's really unfortunate to hear of the extra stresses that he's put under, but also highlights yet again the work that needs to be done by government, the promises they've made that they have not delivered on, and people are suffering because of that.
Vancouver's Mayor Kennedy Stewart acknowledged Ramsey's work and unprecedented demand for housing brought on by COVID-19, underinvestment, and toxic drug crisis. Ramsey's last day at BC Housing is on September 6th. The provincial government says the BC Housing Board is looking for his replacement. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, starting today, kids between 6 months and 4 years old can now get the COVID shot. But how many parents are actually planning to get it done? Benit Brach is finding out the uptake isn't very high at the moment.
Where did you get your shot? Right here?
Where did you get yours? Right there? These two little ones were among the first in line to get their COVID shots.
We came out as soon as we could get these two vaccinated.
A day that's been long awaited for this family.
It's felt like an important part of keeping our communities safe, our families safe, and helping prevent the spread of COVID.
Just over 200,000 kids between 6 months and 4 years of age are eligible for their shots. But as of today, only around 8,200 have booked appointments.
We're excited and relieved that we finally have vaccines that are available and safe and work, and for the youngest children in our families and our communities.
Experts say while COVID has a milder impact on most children, it's still best to stay protected, especially as children head to school in September.
We need to think about how do we best protect those people who need it most, the most vulnerable to COVID and influenza.
But there's still mixed reactions on getting young children vaccinated.
Now that school's starting again, I think we're probably going to go and get it done.
But it's just not been around long enough for me to trust it.
We plan on getting vaccinated. We trust the science behind it.
Overall, children ages 5 to 11 could get their shot since last November. But kids that age still have the lowest vaccination rates across BC at just 46%. About half of the children aged 5 to 11 in the Vancouver Coastal and Vancouver Island health regions have had their shots, while the interior and the north have the lowest rates. And there could be a range of reasons behind the low numbers.
I think parents might feel that they don't need the vaccine, and particularly if they got it and it was very mild. I think there are concerns about the potential long-term effects, even though, the data is very clear that it's a very safe and very effective vaccine.
And even if your child already had COVID, experts advise to still get the jab, but wait 8 weeks since your child's symptoms started or they tested positive.
It is a mild disease in most children, but not all children. And there are a lot of children end up in the hospital with COVID.
It's another measure experts say is needed to protect the little ones and those around them. Benit Brach, CBC News, Abbotsford.
Well, Canadian soccer star Alfonso Davies says he will donate his World Cup earnings to charity. Taking to Twitter this morning, Davies said Canada welcomed him and his family, and he wants to give back to the country that enabled him to live his dreams. The 21-year-old former Whitecaps player is set to play a pivotal role in the men's squad traveling to Qatar this November. It is yet to be determined how much Davies will earn from the World Cup or which charity he'll donate to. And Team Canada has won the Honda Celebration of Light fireworks competition. Canada was up against Japan and Spain, More than 1 million people are estimated to have watched the event held at English Bay over 3 nights. It was the first time since 2019 as pandemic restrictions forced organizers to cancel previous events. Yeah, I could hear the pow pow of the fireworks all the way in Burnaby. Okay, switching gears a bit. A new movie came out this weekend. It has a lot of big-name Hollywood stars. DC League of Super Pets features the voices of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Kevin Hart. The animation is all done right here in Vancouver. The CBC's Caroline Chan went behind the scenes to learn more.
Actually, on this movie, I think I drew more than I have on any other CG movie I've ever worked on. The movie is about a bunch of rescue animals and Crypto, the superdog, getting powers and becoming a team to help save Superman and fight evil, I guess. There was so much of trying to, have that kind of graphic, comic booky feel. I will say it's a lot of work. Yeah, it takes forever. It takes a really big team. You have to understand performance. You have to understand how to make an idea come across clearly and be able to show an expression that someone looking at it will understand the emotion of the character. Yeah, so it's like if I started out with this and this is what the animator had showed me, I could say, well, maybe we want to go a little more like surprised.
The world is seeing that you can actually make a career out of doing what you love, which is, there's a great deal of art and technology that goes into what we do, and there's a role for everybody here. We have all admin roles, finance, as well as the creatives and the technologists. But we launched here in Vancouver in 2015. It was off the back of the Lego movies. And it really was finding the right location that had such robust talent, which is world class here in Vancouver. We're here in BC, we want to be in BC, and we want to have bigger teams coming together, executing amazing films.
It's really, really cool to know that, we work so hard on the art and the animation, and we try to make something that's really affecting to the viewer. If the people like the movie, it becomes a part of their life and their family, and, you can watch it over and over, and I don't know, it's really exciting to me.
Deploy K9 shield. What is a K9?
Well, hate crimes are surging in this country. What's behind the increased numbers, and what can be done about it all? That's next. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. Rising inflation across the country is driving up prices for consumers on everything from the price of fuel to food. And in Alberta's restaurants, owners and managers are needing to get creative or be forced to pass increasing rising costs onto their customers.
Times are tough at Arepus Ranch. Carolina De La Torre owns the food truck with her husband. These days, prices for their ingredients are skyrocketing.
My costs before that were around 27% of my gross sales. And now it's getting like 35% of my gross sale. So it's hard for the business. It's really hard.
Not to mention the price of gas, but in their busy summer season, De La Torre says they can't let their customers down.
We have many contracts that we have to do. We cannot cut customers like this. So we are doing our best.
They aren't the only ones feeling the heat.
Our eggs are, they've gone up around 10 to 15%. Our bacon's gone up over 20. Our canola oil has, in some cases, gone up around 50, which is pretty crazy. I don't understand that.
Red's diners have had to start slowly increasing their menu prices and keep an eye on even the smallest details.
Taking things off our table, like certain condiments, that they definitely add a cost to the bigger picture, saving hours, half an hour's, 15-minute increments here or there. It all adds up, especially across the 3 locations.
Ernie Sue, president of the Alberta Hospitality Association, says rising costs could end up being passed on to the customers.
They have to move the needle with inflation to try to stay alive and to stay as humanly profitable as possible.
Something De La Torre is hoping to avoid as they count on their customers to get them through another rough patch.
I think we passed through the pandemic, and that was really hard. So now is the inflation, we're going to pass through that as well.
Joe Horwitz, CBC News, Calgary.
We're going to go a bit deeper now on one of our top stories. 16 years after killing his pregnant wife, Manjeet, Mukhtar Bengali has been granted day parole. Balbir Gurm is the founder of the Network to Eliminate Violence in Relationships and a former parole board member. Balbir, my social media has exploded today with people from all walks of life angry about this decision. What's your reaction to Mukhtar being released?
Yeah, my emotional reaction was the same, Anita. I felt for the family. I relived what it was like hearing about the news of Manjeet, a wonderfully loved teacher here from a local elementary school in Surrey. And then on top of that, she was pregnant with her second child. And if I recall the case correctly, her husband who murdered her had actually planned it. Like he went and bought newspaper, he bought gasoline, and he went to the Delta port and went to the side and lit her on fire. Like it just brought back all those memories.
Yeah, absolutely. And perhaps you can give us a bit more insight here as a former member of the parole board. What goes into a decision like this to release a man who murdered his wife and unborn child?
Yeah, so in any situation that the parole board has to deal with, they're always looking at risk to reoffend. So is there a risk to reoffend? With partnered violence, yes, it is a murder, but generally people think, okay, if the person's not in a relationship, they're really not at a risk to reoffend. The other one, of course, is considering justice. What is justice? And sometimes that's where the community and the parole board may disagree. And so sometimes we think, oh, why is somebody let out of jail? That's not justice, but we have to, kind of consider that as well. The other one would be their rehabilitation. Did they rehabilitate? And what courses were done, what counseling was done, whatever was required or requested of that inmate. And so if the parole board has chosen to put the person on day parole, then what they're trying to do is reintegrate them back in while somebody is supervising them versus just dropping them back in the community when the sentence is done. So those are kind of the considerations when you're on the parole board.
And just last week, an Abbotsford man was charged with murdering the mother of his children, Kamaljeet Sandhu. Before that, a high-profile case out of Chicago where a woman, Sanya Khan, was killed by her ex-husband, both also South Asian. And all of these cases seem to really have our community talking a lot right now about intimate partner violence. So are South Asian women more at risk? And if so, who's at greatest risk?
Yeah, so South Asian women in general will not be at greater risk. At least we don't have any statistics to support that because a woman across Canada is killed every 6 days. But when you're thinking of new immigrants are at higher risk because they may not speak the language, they may not know anyone, they're in social isolation, they're dependent on the partner for all financial things. And so those are the type of risks, as well as language. They may not speak the language. So those are the risks that can be for any new immigrant.
What role does the patriarchy play here? You know, certain South Asian communities are patriarchal, but also other communities are too. What role does that play?
Generally, whoever has the power tends to oppress others, and that is a contributing factor. The other is just conflict, not knowing how to deal with conflict is another contributing factor. But definitely patriarchal societies, we do see more violence against women.
Balbir Gurm is the founder of the Network to Eliminate Violence in Relationships and a former parole board member. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Anita.
Well, the number of police-reported hate crimes is leaping in Canada, up 72% in just 2 years. Stats Canada recorded a total of 3,360 incidents, with race or ethnicity still being the most common motivator. And as Karen Paul shows us, while a particular hate crime might be directed at a particular person, it can actually harm an entire community.
4 members of the Absol family were killed in London, Ontario, in what police called a hate-motivated attack.
We believe the victims were targeted because of their Islamic faith.
Those who knew them and still live in the community say the effects of that are widespread.
You have to make a conscious effort to be aware, to be more, kind of vigilant and be more observant about what's going on.
experts say hate crimes have risen with increasing divisions in society.
Political narratives that really feed into xenophobia, hatred, bigotry directed towards a whole array of communities. And, you know, we like to blame Trump, but he's not alone.
This advocate wants Ottawa to invest $44 million to support victims of hate crimes as part of its national action plan.
I think it's time, instead of us talking about statistics, we talk about human beings who have been impacted, whose lives have been shattered.
In a tweet, the minister says the plan will include ways to combat hate crimes, train police agencies, prevent radicalization, and protect vulnerable communities. That community impact is something Alberta Crown prosecutors must now consider when laying charges. Their new guidelines state it is in the general public interest to prosecute crimes motivated by bias, prejudice, or hate, based on the victim's ethnicity, gender, religion, and sexual orientation.
And that's one of the assessments that they do in regards to in the public interest. How much harm does it have on the individuals and the community involved here?
It really takes a toll on the mental health and the emotional health and the overall well-being of the entire community.
Advocates say combating hate means each of us need to be more aware of our own biases and take responsibility for calling out racist, sexist, and homophobic incidents. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Hospitals in crisis mode and warnings from unions that things are only expected to get worse. Why healthcare workers are leaving the sector. It's next.
There's a fuss in Vancouver over what people are wearing to the beach, or rather what they're not wearing. Bathing suits are considered bad form on Vancouver's wrecked beach. Nude sunbathing is where it's at. But some people at City Hall are afraid the nudists are scaring away more modest folk. Ian Hannamansing has the story.
To the uninitiated, the most striking thing about this beach is the obvious. But to the regular visitors, and there are hundreds, Wreck Beach is more than just a stretch of sand, it's a state of mind.
I have learned something in this environment that I can't learn anywhere else. When I take off my clothes and all the other people are naked, I'm reminded that we're one humanity because we're all just the way we came.
As I say, one of the few vestiges of freedom left in Canada. You can do pretty well what you want here.
For the last 10 years, the provincial government has allowed nudity here, recognizing what had been unofficially going on for decades. But Greater Vancouver is thinking about restricting nudity on parts of this 6.5-kilometer beach. They haven't gotten any complaints, but they say some people might be unhappy.
Maybe there's a user group out there that would use the foreshore area if they weren't subjected to nude sunbathing.
For people here, those are fighting words.
Should they try to restrict the clothing optional status, that there would be a massive opposition, and we have already begun.
Thousands have signed letters, postcards, vowed to defend their beach, saying it's a matter of principle.
Yes, I'm definitely going to try and help keep it all optional along here, no section where you are forced to wear clothing.
A decision probably won't be made until next year, but the Wreck Beach regulars say it's not too early to fight for the right to be naked. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, Wreck Beach.
To healthcare now. As ERs close or clinics reduce hours across the country, the demand for government to find solutions is high. Today, one province is offering some. Chris Reyes begins with the plan in Newfoundland and Labrador.
To nurses in Newfoundland and Labrador, a promise.
Today, we're here to announce hope.
It comes in the form of incentives to keep nurses in the province, including retention bonuses, signing bonuses for casual nurses who accept some full-time jobs, a plan to reduce mandated shifts with better overtime rates, and reimbursement of licensing fees for nurses who want to come out of retirement. The government also said it will explore childcare options for nurses who work non-standard hours.
This suite will help, if nothing else, show that there is a vision and a strategy moving into the future, and that we will continue to be competitive across the country.
Across the country, hospitals are grasping for their own solutions. Staff shortages have pushed one PEI emergency center to close for the rest of the summer. In Quebec, a nurses' union says healthcare workers with serious COVID symptoms have been asked to work. That's allowed, but the union says it runs counter to public health. In Calgary, an urgent care center just announced reduced hours. And this long weekend, the Ontario Nurses Association said 25 hospitals were forced to scale back operations. That had Ontario Liberals demanding solutions from the Ford government today.
And let's bring all of them to the table and show some operational, day-to-day leadership and accountability.
The Ontario Health Ministry told CBC News it's working with partners across the health sector to address challenges on the ground, including deploying more internationally educated nurses.
They need to talk to other board of nurses in other countries that the credentials should be comparable to Canada. Like for me in the Philippines, I am a bachelor's degree, but when I passed my credentials, when it came back to me, it's non-comparable.
Experts warn hospitals across the country need solutions now to avert a crisis when fall and winter arrive.
I have not seen anything this significant, and it's awful. It's absolutely terrible.
A cry heard from coast to coast.
And earlier today, CBC News Network spoke with a health policy analyst and adjunct professor at Simon Fraser University about the critical situation facing Canadian hospitals and about what the possible solutions could be. Take a listen.
Governments and people like me and researchers have been working, for a long time trying to improve access to healthcare in our system and trying to make sure that everybody has a family doctor, trying to make sure that we don't have to pay for care at the point of service. So it's not a surprise. I mean, my career has been devoted to this, as have the careers of many others. And so, these are not surprises, and there's lots of work going into figuring out how we're going to find our way out of this. I mean, there's, money's always the first answer that we arrive at. And yes, of course, there's a place for money. I mean, who wouldn't want more money? I do think that federal funding, perhaps targeted at access and wait times, but only for provinces that are willing to commit to achieving measurable targets. Just throwing money at a problem isn't necessarily the right answer, but it might work for some, and it might draw some back into care. There will be jurisdictions where nurses or other kinds of healthcare providers feel that they aren't, getting paid fairly during these times. And so, yes, that might be the answer for some jurisdictions. And also, is there a role for distributing care, not just to doctors and nurses, but to other kinds of healthcare providers who could, support us during this time? People are going to emerge because they've got low back pain. I mean, is there somewhere else that they could be going and they could be getting care other than to an emergency room? People are going to emergency room for an ingrown toenail. I mean, where else could they be going for that care? I mean, at this point, I've been wondering as I've been watching these stories unfold, is it time to do what Ontario did in 2020 in long-term care and bring in the military? Should we have military doctors? Is that an option? Is that a possibility? Taking care of us, driving ambulances, helping us as we get through this, summer period. I think part of what's going on now is that there's so many tired healthcare providers, and they've been working so hard for so long, and they're taking some time, if they can, to steel themselves for what's coming in the fall and in the winter. And, who can blame them? It's reasonable in Canada, where we have long winters, that we take some time in the summer and we try and recover. But again, that leaves the healthcare system with challenges, and especially the emergency rooms when we don't have primary care necessarily available. Although, every province is trying different solutions. British Columbia has tried the primary care centers that the ministry has been building as a way of taking some of the pressure off the emergency rooms for those who need care within 12 to 24 hours. But it's hard to keep those staffed as well. And so, there's not a perfect solution. There are short-term interventions. If we really are in such a crisis, then maybe we do need to call in, extra support from in various ways. I mean, I can't help but think of the thousands of internationally trained healthcare providers in this country, whether they're nurses or doctors, doing other than healthcare, and what can we do to help support them and bring them on board to help us with this right now, right now when people are starting to lose trust.
A CBC News investigation has revealed disturbing details about allegations of abuse at a private Christian school in Saskatchewan. Former students allege they were subjected to violent punishments, belittling abuse, and exorcisms. Jesse Anton shows us how they're fighting back.
It's disgusting, it's wrong, and it's evil. It's evil.
Coy Nolan will never forget that day in May of 2004 when a handful of teachers and religious leaders from his Saskatoon private school visited his childhood home. Nolan says they began yelling, grunting, and making other unintelligible sounds known as speaking in tongues. His mother, no longer in control, crying in the corner as they spanked the 16-year-old repeatedly with a large wooden paddle, a violent exorcism meant to cast out what they believed to be his gay demons.
I didn't know what I was going to do. I tried for so long, to pray it away, try not to be what I was, just so that I could stay with my friends and my family and the church and the school, because that's the only thing I really knew.
Nolan's classmate and best friend, Caitlin Erickson, remembers wanting to speak out about her own abuse, but holding back for fear of getting paddled.
I felt very powerless because there was a lot of adults that were involved in this that at no point stopped and said, hey, we've gone too far. So it was a very powerless feeling. It was very traumatic.
The non-denominational Christian Center Academy opened in 1982, but didn't receive provincial accreditation allowing students to enter university or college until 1994. Like other private schools, parents pay tuition and fundraise. It's also been receiving Saskatchewan government funding since 2012. A year later, in 2013, the school changed its name to Legacy Christian Academy. Erickson was the first out of at least 18 former Christian Center Academy students to launch a criminal abuse complaint. The file is now in the hands of Crown prosecutors after a year-long investigation by Saskatoon police. Complaints include coercion, solitary confinement, and frequent paddlings, many of which allegedly happened after the Supreme Court banned corporal punishment by teachers in early 2004.
That was not okay, and it's taken a long time for people to speak up, so yeah. I mean, it was a cult. It was essentially a cult.
Current leaders of both the school and the connected church have declined interviews with CBC News. In a written statement, school officials say they're grieved to learn of former students who feel they were subjected to abuse during their time at Christian Center Academy, and that they support any former student who wants to file a police report so it can be investigated and dealt with properly and legally. Erickson and other former students who came forward say the people who committed these acts must be held accountable, and they want the Saskatchewan government to investigate the school itself, freezing any provincial money and cancelling any tax breaks until all questions are answered.
Funding these types of schools is essentially the government saying, go ahead, continue to do these things.
The Ministry of Education tells CBC News independent schools go through 3 on-site inspections each year, and the most recent one at this academy was back in June. The written statement also says the province has not received any complaints about this school since it started receiving provincial funding a decade ago. Some students say that's not true, and they supplied CBC News with email conversations they've had with the Education Minister's office.
A lot of it is behind the scenes and untalked about, and that's what I'm hoping I can tell with my story.
While most teachers have moved on since Nolan and Erickson went to the school, they say some of the same people are still working there and that there has been no effort to apologize or make amends. Jesse Anton, CBC News, Regina.
We are learning more today about the death of an al-Qaeda leader killed by a U.S. drone strike in Afghanistan over the weekend. The killing is a major victory for U.S. counterterrorism intelligence, and the fact that he was tracked down in Kabul is potentially significant. As the CBC's Mukta Gebrselassie reports, U.S. officials claim the Taliban knew he was there.
We heard President Joe Biden say the operation successfully took out the al-Qaeda leader without harming anyone else. We learned that Ayman al-Zawahri had been in Afghanistan to be with his family for months and that he was living in Kabul in a safe house. U.S. intelligence was tracking him, and the president was briefed on this last month. He was even shown a model of the safe house. Al-Zawahri apparently stuck to a routine, regularly spending time on his balcony, and that's where he was when a U.S. drone fired off 2 missiles, killing him. Here's more from President Biden.
Now, justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more. People around the world no longer need to fear the vicious and determined killer. The United States continues to demonstrate our resolve and our capacity to defend the American people against those who seek to do us harm.
Al-Zawahri took over the leadership of al-Qaeda after the U.S. killed Osama bin Laden in 2011. And experts say now that he's been killed, it's likely someone else will just replace him. But this has also raised questions about the Taliban. U.S. officials say members of the Taliban knew the al-Qaeda leader was in Kabul, and that is a violation of the Doha Agreement not to allow Afghanistan to become a safe haven for terrorists. So what is the U.S. going to do about it? Here's more from John Kirby, who is with the National Security Council.
The strike itself is a measure of accountability. The strike itself tells them, shows them how serious we are about our desire never to see Afghanistan become a safe haven again for the launch of attacks against our homeland. And it shows them the degree to which we're capable of doing this without boots on the ground.
It is believed that al-Qaeda still has a small presence in Afghanistan, but President Joe Biden said yesterday that the U.S. will make sure that Afghanistan doesn't become a safe haven for terrorists. Mukta Gebrselassie, CBC News, Washington.
U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi arrived in Taiwan today despite China's threats of, quote, grave consequences. Pelosi landed on the island with plans to meet the Taiwanese leader and other officials. China views Taiwan as part of its territory. The White House insists the trip doesn't signal a change in U.S. policy, which emphasizes strategic ambiguity with those who control Taiwan. Pelosi is now the highest-ranking American official in 25 years to visit the self-ruled island. Well, hail as big as grapefruit. Just some of the tapestry of weather hitting Alberta this past weekend. We'll bring you all the highlights coming up. And at 6:44, a live look tonight at BC Place. Much different here. Cooling weather, though, and that means for a little easier night sleeping. Is there any much needed rain in the forecast? Kuljeet has her eyes on it all next.
99% of parents say they would not put a child under 7 on public transport. So what we've decided to do
is to put some children on public transport
who are under the age of 7. We have an idea that we need to protect our children, except that if you put a safety net under someone, you don't learn from that.
So you are going to go on your own without mum and dad.
This is completely untested.
It's so interesting how confident a 5-year-old actually is out in the world.
可愛い子には旅をさせって言って、なんかこう近所のスーパーにも。
I'm just not sure that they are savvy enough to push those boundaries themselves.
We are entering into the unknown. I just hope they're up to it.
I can't go anywhere. We were on our own and it was like we were bigger than we are.
Hi world, I'm Gordy, and today we're going to learn how life can survive in the Arctic. Characterized by icy plains, a desolate landscape, and temperatures that can reach negative 70 degrees Celsius, the Arctic is one of the harshest environments on Earth.
Yet despite the cards being stacked against it, nature has not only found a way to survive here, but in some cases get real thick in the process.
But if it's so cold, flat, and dry in the Arctic, how is it possible for life to live here?
I mean, look at this! It's like a desert, but it's cold! And my legs hurt!
Gordy, where are your pants?
I didn't bring them.
He didn't bring pants. Can somebody get this guy some pants?
Well, one word captured the holiday weekend in Alberta: stormy. Dangerous winds, a tornado, and baseball-sized hail hit several regions. Corey Seegers is tracking the aftermath and the damage.
The last few days have seen a series of watches and warnings for heat, thunderstorms, and tornadoes. The community of Hines Creek, about 600 kilometers northwest of Edmonton, is still cleaning up after a major storm hit that village Friday. Environment Canada is trying to determine if the system that tore roofs from buildings and toppled trees was a straight-line wind or a tornado.
It's turning, guys.
In central Alberta, a dramatic sight Sunday evening after a tornado touched down near the town of Coronation. Marky Bossert was at her family's farm when they saw the storm rolling in and ran for cover.
We went inside, and then we were inside, and it sounded scary, and obviously it was just windy, and there was, like, I don't know, nickel-sized hail. No damage or anything like that, but no, that was definitely as close as I needed it to be.
Campers near Burnstick Lake were awoken to a wicked storm on Monday. I spoke to a family who was preparing to evacuate their campsite after seeing lightning in the distance. Gloria Jones O'Malley told me before they could get out, the storm was on them and it was deafening. Trees fell and punctured their camper, where her 2-year-old was sleeping moments before. O'Malley told me so many trees came down during the storm, they needed a chainsaw to cut themselves a path out of the area. Environment Canada says things will remain unstable this week, meaning more severe weather is expected. Corey Seegers, CBC News, Edmonton.
All right, Johanna is off, Kuljeet is in, and Kuljeet, a different story here, that's for sure. No massive hail.
Huge different story here. And today's big story was that the heat warning has finally ended for most of British Columbia and the South Coast. However, record temperatures around this time of year, 26.7 set back about 15 years ago in 2007. We got pretty close. We were just a few degrees off, so still quite warm. Seasonal low today was 16. Seasonal average is around 13.8, so we're above seasonal temperatures still. 23 degrees was today's high. Seasonal average around this time is just over 22. It is going to start to cool down a little bit in the coming days, and these were the temperatures across the west in Prince George, up to 21 degrees. Ashcroft and Lytton still very hot, and that's where our fire danger is at extreme levels. Fort McMurray, 19 degrees, 22 and warm in Calgary. And one of the hot spots in Canada actually turned out to be Winnipeg today, 26 degrees there. And in BC, it was Kelowna at 31 degrees. Moving across to the East Coast, Ottawa at 20, Charlottetown at 22, and 18 degrees in St. John. So it's nice and cool on the East Coast. Here's what's happening for us in the next couple of days. Nice and cool for tomorrow, Wednesday, with some rain coming in for the afternoon. Lows dropping down to 15. Rain risk stays with us through to Thursday, and then we start to kind of climb those temperatures again at 21. And just in time for the weekend, we're going to see some sunshine come in for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Inland temperatures climbing back up towards the 30s. Not as hot as it was last week, but it's going to get pretty hot again. Summer-like conditions sitting at seasonal temperatures on Monday and Tuesday as well. The heat spot is going to be Tuesday afternoon with 31 degrees in the Abbotsford-Fraser Valley region. Anita?
All right, thanks, Kuljeet. Still hot for sure.
Yes.
Thanks. We'll move over spelling bees. There's a new game in town. We meet the Montrealer who's been crowned a North American Scrabble champ. It's coming up.
People from across Canada and even some places outside the country came to take part in Jalsa Salana. Lal Khan Malik flew in from Toronto. He's the national president of Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat Canada. After 2 years apart, he says it feels good to reconnect.
Religion has two parts. One is what deals with the man and God, and the other man and with other men and women in the society. So we are reminded of our obligations to God and our obligations to humans.
That connection extending further than just the Muslim community. This year's convention focuses on building relationships with Indigenous people in Canada. Chief James Snakeskin came to the conference from Thunderchild First Nation in Saskatchewan.
Different peoples from different countries are here in Canada with us, and we have to learn how to get along, live in harmony, love one another, share. That's what we have to teach our youth.
The convention featured separate prayers and speakers for men and women, along with a low-priced market, a way to give back to the community. Joe Horwood, CBC News, Calgary.
The glitz and the glamour of yesterday's Grand Parade is sticking around for another day. Described as the Caribbean Carnival for the LGBTQ community, Bloc Obana is back this year in person.
Queer people have been at Caravana for years. We've always been there playing mass, doing all these sorts of things. But it's nice to have a special place where we can all go and sort of celebrate together as a community, knowing that there will be no issues around homophobia, anti-Black racism, transphobia, and all those sorts of things.
This is the 12th year of the event. It was organized to give an inclusive space to those who might not feel comfortable amidst a largely straight crowd at the carnival, as well as an event for Black LGBTQ artists and DJs to showcase their talents. LGBTQ DJs like Michelle Asari, known as Cookie Dough.
12 years ago, there was probably only one place that we could play for one weekend, and now every weekend, every month, every year, there's something going on bigger and better.
The organizer says the event has grown tenfold in numbers, going from about 100 people in the first year to over 1,000 attendees now.
So as we go every year, we're just getting more and more and more. So I'm really hoping this year we blow it out of the park.
Adrian Brown and Karan Prender guests live in the USA and came here for yesterday's parade. They say they felt comfortable at Caribbean Carnival, but some might not have.
It's very important to have events like this so people can come out and be themselves and feel great and just be open.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Cinematheque with Stephen Quinn at a gala on August 19th. Enjoy prize draws, culinary delights, and more. Get tickets today at thecinematheque.ca and never miss a special programming series or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
A Squamish artist and mechanical engineer is trying to turn science fiction into science fact. He's come up with a wild cross between Iron Man and a Transformer. Take a look.
Okay. See what she's got.
That's Jonathan Tippett, who is realizing a 15-year dream, piloting the world's largest four-legged exoskeleton mechanical suit. It weighs in at about 4,000 kilograms. Tippett is the inventor and test pilot. The machine is controlled by the movements of its pilot, strapped into a harness at its center. He says the goal of the project is to create a brand new human experience. He hopes to develop a racing league for these machines. Sure, horse racing or this, I mean, it may be a toss-up. But one thing that isn't a toss-up, this year's North American Scrabble champ. Yep, Michael Fagan from Montreal has won this year's Scrabble Players Championship in Baltimore. Matt Demore spoke with him and challenged him to a game.
Michael is such a boss.
This wasn't just a good Scrabble turn for Michael Fagan. It's the moment he secured victory at the Scrabble Players Championship in Baltimore and the title of 2022 champion.
Very thrilling, but also very surprising for me. I mean, I'm certainly a very, very strong player, but this is the biggest competition of the year in North America.
Fagan's journey to Baltimore began when he started playing in smaller tournaments as a teenager, but his knack for spelling started much earlier.
And at the young age of 3, I was using fridge magnets to spell out all kinds of different words on the fridge.
Pretty impressive beginnings, but I wasn't going to let that intimidate me.
So, Michael, are you up for a friendly match?
Yes.
With the linguistic gauntlet thrown, it was time to get serious.
Now, I challenged him to a friendly game, but make no mistake, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to compete.
And my colleagues were there to stand by me.
Let's go, Matt! Hey, do any of you guys know how to play Scrabble?
Oh, God.
With my opponent ready, the match began, and it wasn't pretty.
I'm actually lucky here because I can play all 7 of my letters.
Your opening word that you used all your letters for gave you 70 points?
That's correct.
All right, well, we're off to a great start, so let's keep this going. Let me see if I can catch up a little bit.
Spoiler alert, I didn't. But Fagan's luck and skill were lining up just fine.
It's a relatively obscure word, ZEK. It means an inmate in a Soviet labor camp.
Finally, I had to face facts. I wasn't going to beat the master, so I resigned in disgrace.
Don't be so hard on yourself. I mean, it's your first time playing this game in a really long time.
Well, that's very generous of you. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to play this game with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome.
As I walked away from the battlefield of words in shame, Fagan had his sights on next year's championship, with a drive to defend his title. Matt Damour, CBC News, Montreal.
They take that very seriously, but I do love a good game of Scrabble, so super into this. The winning word, by the way, leveret, an ancient Hebrew custom in which a man is obliged to marry his brother's widow. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News. We'll see you back here tomorrow.